Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, I'm just going to cover a lot of what's been going on over the last few days in terms of transfers and where things are just at as of this moment in time. I also want to talk about some of the youth that we are very likely going to see soon and some updates there. Talk about injury returns, talk about the midfield. Always a hot button topic right now, and one that is sure to cause a lot of discussion. And then also speak on strikers because there's been a little bit of news overnight with a name coming up that was somewhat written off. I wouldn't say written off, but has been somewhat moved down the ladder. So let's get into discussing all of it and get started. Number one, on youth, I want to talk about this because one of the things that we are expecting to see in against Brentford, for example, and in the coming weeks will be some youth playing in the first team. Obviously, in between the first and the eighth, the two legs of this Europa League tie, we're going to need to keep everybody fresh, avoid injuries, and have probably heavily rotate and make sure that we're all good for the second leg, regardless of what happens in the first leg. So we'll expect to see a lot of youth there. Now, we may not see the same amount of youth involvement in the final games of the season if we get through that Europa League leg and go to the final, because obviously with only a game a week, you're going to pretty much want to have your starters playing, maybe not all in the first game after the second leg, but in the following one, to stay kind of fresh and to not, you don't want them on the bench for weeks, you know what I mean? Not playing at all and then go into a European final. So this may be our best bet this coming Sunday to see some youth players involved in the first team that we haven't seen as of yet. A couple of things I want to share on this are, number one, Mantato. I've spoken about, his situation that, they do want him up into the first team, but I believe he still needs to get that pro contract signed and done and sorted. Now, from my understanding, there is supposed to be some sort of development on this very, very soon that should resolve things and hopefully allow him to make it into, the first team at some point before the end of the season to get a view as well. But it needs to be resolved, and it's supposed to be very soon. I just don't know why not quite yet, but we really should be seeing it at any moment. Now that this sort of gets fixed up and everything's all set there. Additionally, it's important because, of course, there's a summer tour coming. There's the one that's going to Malaysia, which is right at the end of the season. And then, of course, in July, the one that comes to the States. And they will want to bring youth players on that they think are for two purposes. Number one, who could become a first teamer, who could contribute to the first team, who do they need to get a look at? And then additionally, what players would it be worth, as well, that the decision might then be to loan them, and it'd be good to get them that experience, get them seeing out there, get them on a loan or get them on a sale to help add to the transfer bucket, essentially. And those are both important factors in what they want to do with youth this summer. So we're coming sort of to our last chance to see a few players in the first team, and this week this coming Sunday may be the best time to see as many youth players as possible get that kind of experience in the first team. So we should see that. One of the other players that it would be, of course, very interesting to see that has not gotten a debut yet, aside from Mantato, are players like Camason, who has been excellent at the youth level. An athletic, right back, and United a little short in that position right now. If they don't want to have to play somebody who is currently, like Dorgu, if we wants to get him rest, we're going to need somebody for that right back position. If we don't want to play Mazraoui, who probably will need rest, we're going to need somebody. That would be one that would be really great to see, and that hopefully we could see with the first team as well. So, some interesting things. Hopefully we'll get a clue as of this. Hopefully we see something on Mantato this week, as it should be expected, in order to have him get into the first team, as well as I really do think he's a player set to be able to contribute even next year to the team, and is really liked. But we need to see him, if everything gets sorted, and him may be able to make that step up into the first team. In terms of injury returns this week, there's an expectation, obviously, Amad Diallo returning to first team training as of yesterday, as far as I know. To full team training. He probably will make the trip for the Europa, but it remains to be seen whether he was in the squad or not. Matthijs de Ligt is someone who could also make the trip and could even be in the squad for Thursday. But ideally, then we have both of them in the squad for Thursday, probably not getting minutes depending on the game state. Sunday, you'd like to probably see them getting 30 minutes, where you're starting a bunch of youth players and you have players like Amad de Ligt getting them a chance to get back on the pitch, get minutes under their belt so that they could be ready to start on the following Thursday for the second leg. So a few of those players, I think, De Ligt and Ahmad being the key ones that we should expect to hopefully see make the squad Thursday would be a very good sign. And that way we could see them get minutes on Sunday and make it into the starting lineup for the second leg. That would be a big boost, I think, to everything. Should they be able to make it into the squad, at that point in time. We need it. We certainly need every option that we have for this. I mean, this is our season being defined by this. It really is. It has such a big knock-on effect, this whole Europa thing. We all know it. We all feel it. I think we're all nervous. We're all concerned. We're all worried. We're all, very agitated about the potential of whether of what happens here, and these injuries could have a huge impact. I mean, Ahmad could be, when you look at our goal scoring issues, the only forward we've had who've scored goals in our last Europa League legs has been Xerxes, who is also out with injury probably till the end of the season. So, getting a forward back who could score goals even just for the second leg could be a game changer. And I think if we could leave Bilbao with a lead or a draw, then knowing that Ahmad will be coming back gives us a huge amount of incentive to feel like we can take it home in that second leg. So we'll have to see there. On Cunha, obviously, I know there's been a lot of update, non-update type of things on that and everything. And the thing about it that I would just say is that I don't believe there's anything we need to worry about here. The club are very optimistic that this deal will get done now. Um, I don't think that either party or any of the parties involved particularly want to, speak too much about it at this point in time and say, oh yeah, we're discussing this, we're discussing that, we're doing this, we're doing that, and the deal is nearly done. I don't think anybody wants to do that. And so, it'd be better just to be calm, leave it. As far as I know, it had reached a point of personal terms to where the details, things that really don't mess with a deal, but they're just the basic things that you sort out, and there's really no rush. Um, Not that we don't want to wrap it up soon, but because, realistically, both parties will want to just have things ready to go, and they can be ready to go without anything formal or anybody confirming anything formal. But there really is nothing to worry about here, and they're in the minutia of detail. Just be patient. We haven't even gotten to summer, and we know they're already really looking to wrap this one up, and very likely will have it wrapped up um, in the very near future. So yeah, that one I'm not even slightly concerned about. I wouldn't concern yourself with. I wouldn't sit there waiting for and looking for updates constantly or anything like that. It's unnecessary. We don't really need it. We're probably not going to see it. Um, just wait. I personally wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear anything until after our Europa campaign on it. And that's okay with me. Yeah, it's okay with me. So that's what we've got there, obviously. Moving on to strikers, and obviously this is the big topic. After Cunha, what do we do? And we know that Liam Delap is the first choice as of right now, striker target, the player that we are pursuing, the player that we are trying to sign before anybody else in terms of the striker position. Ipswich are confirmed to be relegated, so obviously he's going down that route. He's going to 30 million for his release clause. Again, Chelsea United the most active on this. Now, there's been some talk that he wants to decide based on whether or, based on European competitions, based on Champions League, based on things like that. Now, we spoke about this in the last live kind of at length. And my opinion on this matter is that if it's true, if that is the case, personally, I don't like it. Personally, I think that when a player is 22, 23 years old, looking at whether or not they're going to join a club for a long career on the basis of whether they pull off a win in a final or not, to me, is poor judgment. If it's true, to me, that's a major, major red flag. Again, as I would understand it, as a player gets a bit older, but if you're joining United, you're not joining because we secured Champions League this year. You're not joining because we win or don't win the Europa final. You know who United are. You know what kind of team we are. You know where we're going. You know what we're building. You either want to join that or you don't, and I think that is very, very clear with Cunha why that's the case. And that he wants to join regardless, and that's what makes it such a straightforward deal, but also makes it one that is particularly more exciting because to me it shows this is where I said there's a similarity to Bruno in that to me I see a player who wants the responsibility, who wants to carry the team. I'm This isn't even a Delap thing because this affects the next player that we'll talk about too. It's like I just don't like it at all. It's a major personality red flag to me from a footballing standpoint. Are you there to find out which team is going to, you know, give you the most spotlight? Or are you there to help the team get back where it needs to be and understand what it is doing as a team? I get that. If you just want to say, hey, I want to join the best team, fine. But that's not really defined by, where one finishes. The last 4 games of the season, if Chelsea make it to the Champions League and get fifth or they get sixth or United win their final, that doesn't change anything about where these two teams are really at because neither are winning the Champions League next year, but they're both teams that can be, that are going to be competitive in some respect or another. And again, it's just one season too, out of a whole career. So I'm not a big fan of any talk of that. I can't say that that's totally true or not. However, I think that, as I said before, if we have to wait till the end of the season to find out, then it starts to become feeling true. And to me, it's a red flag. If that is the case with Liam Delap, that he's waiting for that I think that's a red flag. I think if he didn't want to join us because we're not in Champions League, I don't want him to join. Because that doesn't speak to me as a player who understands where we are as a club. Because whether we make it to Champions League or not next season, you know, we could bounce from the Champions League group stages very easily, we very much could. We very much could end up prioritizing the league. And I think as fans, we'd all probably prefer us to. We're all more concerned about becoming a strong force in the league week in and week out, performing consistently, climbing the table, and being back among the best in the league than I am with European performances right now. The only reason I really want Champions League personally is the money. Obviously, I like to see the games. I like to see United play in those games. I like to see more games. I like when United are in Europe. It's great. I think it's a good experience, but I'm not expecting anything. Where I want to see United perform on a week in and week out basis is in the Premier League. And once we're doing that, then the European competitions become more important, and performing week in and week out in Champions League and becoming a force there matters to me more. And I think most fans would agree. I did a poll about that. And I think that most people agreed that they'd like to see United be good in the Premier League more than the Champions League. Like the vast majority agreed with that. So I still have some concerns about that kind of mindset. We don't 100% know that that's true or not, mind you. But if it's waiting till the end of the season to see where the teams land, then clearly it is. And I just don't get that. I don't get what the last few games are going to tell you about a project, about a team, about anywhere you're going to go that you didn't know already. The other name that kind of ties into this is and we see this from Christopher Michel, who's been a very good source for United. Victor Gyokeres will be a hot topic in the market this summer. He wants to play Champions League. Now, Victor Gyokeres is older, 26 years old, not old, 26 years old, wants to play in the Champions League. He's in the Champions League now. He's not at a relegated Ipswich side. And obviously he's probably making his last big move, and he's sort of got going late. So Arsenal and Chelsea are very interested. United looking closely. Emram has developed him to have a realistic chance. The club is probably to win the Europa League. And there, is it less of a red flag? Yes, but it's still a little concerning to me because it's like, you don't want to join our project because of that? Or is it financial? And it doesn't particularly say that. The part of it that doesn't totally jive with me is Gyokeres will cost £60 million. We can't afford that. So we need Champions League to afford him. In that case, it makes sense. And he's a better player than Liam Delap. He's a better footballer right now. Obviously, he knows Amarim, all of that would fit in well. I do have some concerns with him about how he would translate to England. In that respect, I do have some concerns. But he's been performing at an absolutely unbelievable level. He's a very good player. If United got Champions League, they could afford him without sales. So if we get Champions League, then you start to look at it and say, well, this is a little bit weird. If Delap is waiting to see if we get Champions League, and we get Champions League, then aren't we just getting Delap since he's our top target, which would rule us out of getting Gyokeres? Or can we get Champions League and then we change targets? But according to Ornstein and others, we're not going to change our targets based on whether we get Champions League or not. So we'd have to get Champions League, miss out on Delap, and then spend more money for a different choice in Gyokeres. Now, maybe that is possible, but I'm just not totally convinced that it completely makes sense. We've had it played down, quite a bit by other people as well throughout the lead up to the window through these months that, Gyokeres wasn't really the top target. Now, maybe that's simply because he wouldn't join without Champions League and all of that. But I don't think we'd be out of the race for him. I think it's certainly one you have to consider. Better player. Again, I'm not totally sold on the idea that it requires Champions League for him to want to join. But then again, at the same time, it can be read a couple different ways. Financially, with his wages, with his cost, then it makes sense that we probably only want to do it if you're getting Champions League. But then I would just say, why not just spend a little more for Osimhen? The fees are about the same, maybe even a little lower for Osimhen, even though his wages are a little higher. It's a strange one to me. That being said, obviously, when you look at the numbers, Gyokeres is exceptional this season, playing in a different league, of course, but you don't find many strikers doing better than Gyokeres right now in terms of everything that he does. I still do have some concerns based on some of the things he does, how they would translate to the Premier League. Yeah, I do. But he is obviously top player, scored an enormous number of goals, and I would still take him over Liam Delap. So it's an interesting one there. It still doesn't answer our question, which is if we don't get Champions League and Delap wants to choose Chelsea, which is a distinct possibility regardless, well, then we're not in the race for Gyokeres. Who are we getting at striker? I still don't know the answer to that. We're still not seeing the answer to that. The fact that we have good reports about us looking at other strikers, to me, still says that we're not 100% sure that Delap will choose us either way. And I think that is smart because I don't think that I think there's a decent chance he does go to Chelsea, but we still don't know what like the backup plan is. Like no Champions League, worst case scenario type of thing. We could get Champions League. Delap chooses Chelsea, and then we decide to go for Gyokeres, and in which case I'd be very happy with that decision too. It's less problematic for me, Gyokeres wanting Champions League, because he's playing in it presently, and he doesn't want to take a step down. He's older than it is if the lap is prioritizing Champions League. But that's just my opinion. You feel free to disagree with that as well. It may not be, you may not believe it's an issue at all for a player to want to choose that. I'm still not totally convinced it's the reason anyway. But clearly, we do like Gyokeres, but given costs, given everything involved, it's much more conditional in a similar way that Osimhen was much more conditional, but that's been ruled out completely now because wages are even higher, and he can get the money in Saudi, whereas we could probably be a lot more competitive for Gyokeres with Chelsea and Arsenal. And the wages will still be higher than Delap, but they're not going to be 350,000. So fair enough. That it's a much more palatable deal in that respect. Moving on to midfielders, talking about this, and I just want to again, bring up this point of discussion that is sure to boil some to cause some, I should say, maybe I'll just say it like this, to cause some bother. Um, in terms of what United are looking at, overall, and where they're going. Obviously, we know that Ederson has been a major target. Now, there's been some reports claiming they want 75 million euros for him. I don't think that price is accurate. I think it's significant. I think it would be lower than that. United aren't going to pay that regardless, so you don't have to worry. They'd be looking to pay in the range of what they did pay for Ugarte to bring in someone like Ederson. One of the obvious discussion points about this a lot of people have, and why they're down on the Ederson deal, is saying, hey, we should get someone to partner Kobbie Mainoo, not partner Manuel Ugarte. The problem with that statement is, and I know why people don't want to get into it, and I understand it, and I don't even disagree, because Kobbie Mainoo is a fantastic talent, and nobody wants to criticize him, which is fair. The problem is that you can't get anybody to partner Kobbie Mainoo, because at the moment, Kobbie Mainoo isn't physically fit enough to play in the United midfield, and that's the truth. And I still think his long-term role is that position in the midfield, and I think that in the long term, as he gets more fit, more athletic, more, has more endurance and all of that, that someone like Ugarte is his ideal partner, because it's someone who can do a lot of the work. The dirty work and all of that. But it's really clear to me that that's not going to work. I'll give you the example of on Sunday, Bournemouth, Casemiro and Mainoo partnership. And by the way, once again, Bruno starting forward, Kobbie starting the midfield. So clearly there's kind of hope that that dynamic would work. The midfield was horrible. I'm not even saying Kobbie performed poorly, because he was being very aggressive, getting all over the pitch, all that. The midfield was non-existent, though. They did nothing out of possession. They were completely nowhere to be seen. Again, I will say, despite all the big loving for Casemiro, people tend to turn a blind eye. Whenever he's playing in the Premier League without Ugarte, he looks really poor. And it's just simply down to legs, that having a player who can do the dirty work, and we don't have anybody to do that. This kind of graph was, somebody posted this in Discord last night, and I posted it online because I'm trying to show the point, and that keeps being missed. Now, this is a graph about counter pressures. Now, counter pressures are not the same thing as pressing. Counter pressing is much more applicable to a Ruben Amorim system. Counter pressing is, of course, when you lose the ball, that you apply pressure. So you can see right here, a counter pressure is a pressure applied within 5 seconds of a turnover. So you lose the ball, you press high to win it back immediately. Now, that's not like, for example, from a goal kick. There's pressing where, they have a goal kick, they're passing around the back, you're pressing them, you're trying to cut them down. This is, you take a shot, you turn it over, you misplace a pass in the opposition half, and then, not you, but the team does, and then somebody is pressing with it. Counter pressing is a huge, huge, huge part of Ruben Amorim's game. He's not a tactical manager that sets you up to press 24/7 like Klopp, but he does have a high impetus on counter pressing. One of the things we've seen, like when Ugarte played, like for example against Wolves, and in the Europa League, especially in that first 50, 60 minutes, is lose the ball, press high, win it really high, stay and maintain the attack. Well, you can see here Ugarte is quite literally potentially the best player in the world at this, at counter pressure regains and counter pressures per 90. So this is something he does extremely well. When United lose it high, jumping up, backing up the press, winning it high, even against Bournemouth when they went down to 10 men, it was part of what helped us get the goal towards the end, even though we struggled anyway, was winning the ball back quickly when we lost it and maintaining that pressure. This is an important aspect. You can see like Szoboszlai is all the way up here. You can see like João Neves is very good at it. You can see guys like Pedri, are so good at these types of things. But this is something Ugarte is one of the best in the world at. When you look at his stats in general, high duel winning, high defensive actions, those don't even include pressures. So he's a ball winning midfielder. I also want to point out, by the way, that his carrying has come up dramatically as the season has gone on. He's been more willing to carry the ball and do well with it. That has improved over the course of the season from being like 7th percentile to 35th. So it's something that's come up. But regardless, you get that he's a player who does that. Now, in theory, someone like Kabi, who's more creative, would be the right partner. The issue is there isn't a partner for Kabi Menu right now because he doesn't have the legs to cover the midfield at the moment. And in an ideal world, you already have the right partner in Ugarte. But right now, why they're looking at Ederson is someone who has the legs and the athleticism and will do a lot of the passing and progression and forward thinking work to partner someone, like Ugarte. And it is the right thing. It is the right thing to do. It becomes really noticeable. And again, I think gets completely overlooked that when he is not playing, we can't press. There is the midfield's responsibility in an Amorim team is to back up the press. And I'll continue to talk about it because it's so relevant to our transfer strategy. Getting players who can back up the press, who have the legs in the midfield to back up the press. That's the job of an Amorim midfielder. And clearly with the target of Ederson, it's the same thing. We want players who can back up the press, not sit and dictate from deep, because that's not what his midfield is about. Again, I will give the example that I was speaking on a live recently about how United are, in a respect, modeling a lot of the way that they build their personnel off of Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp, who Amorim is considered to be fairly close to from an analytical standpoint. Their midfield's job was essentially, for the most part, back up the press and shuttle the ball to the wide areas where a lot of the creativity is set to come from. So that's why, Ederson, and I think that's why still Kabi Mainu can be that guy, and I hope he is, because he's so good on the ball and there's so many qualities that he has. But you can see it in the games where he's partnered with someone like Casemiro, who's a progressor but doesn't have the legs backing it up, doesn't do all the defensive duties in the same way, that the midfield was wide open again. And that is part of the problem and the balance of getting things right. And maybe against teams that sit deep you can get away with it, but against most games you need that in order to press well. So, that's sort of the uncomfortable conversation to be had right now about Manu and the whole midfield discussion, because Ruben Amorim said it himself. He said he was struggling with the with the defensive side of it, with the out of possession side of it. There's no partner for Kabi Manu right now until he becomes more fit, more robust, and improves in some of these areas, which he should do on top of his talents and ability on the ball. And hopefully he can, and hopefully through summer he continues and he can nail down that position and he can play as a 10 and play as an 8 and it's whatever. But it explains why someone like Ederson is a dream target for United and is someone they want, because when Ugarte is factually, despite what people may say, maybe the best destroyer in football in terms of everything that he does right now. In terms of the volume of duel winning, the volume of aerial, he's good in the air, he's good at winning aerial duels, the volume of counter pressures, these types of things, he's good at all of that. They used to have a pressure stat on things like Football Reference and stuff to be able to see it, but it all disappeared. So that's why I pulled that up, because I always thought it was very useful. Um, and being able to press and counter press effectively is something United have been really bad at as well in recent times. That makes it hard for us to sustain attacks. So when you have a player like that, you use them and you build, not around them, but with them, to have everybody playing into complementary strengths, especially in an Amarim team. So hopefully, Kabi can improve, but it's just something people have to admit a little bit that they don't want to. Is that Kabi Mainu's not fit enough for the midfield at the moment? So there's no getting a partner that solves all the problems for him because you're going to end up with the same issues. I think he can be that guy, and hopefully he is. And then you could have Ederson and Mainu together, and Ederson and Ugarte Mainu, and there's lots of iterations that can work on balance of things. But I do also believe that this means United will be in the market for a younger, uh, more affordable player. Because if Ederson is the dream target, then take that model of player and say, ooh, okay. Well, who could we get, that is similar that might be more affordable? Let's say that he's too expensive. Think of that model of player. And again, I say that you get someone like Hayden Hackney makes perfect sense for that we've discussed, that we've looked at. You could get an older player like Douglas Luiz, who's a similar style of player that may be affordable, but there's some obvious red flags about that. Or United come up with somebody via Vivel or another name, out there that's affordable. But I would certainly look to the championship because I think there's players that could do that. Joe Bellingham is a name that has been mentioned that also kind of fits that too, in a respect, even though I think he's got a ways to go developmentally. But this is a point I'll never stop talking about simply because regardless of it being an opinion or not, it's also the reality of how the club view the midfield, how Amarim views the midfield, and I'm going to continue trying to at least try to bring an understanding, even if you don't like it, even if you disagree with it. That is their view. Um, yeah, but I also would like to see our players who do good work get quite a bit more respect than they do. Unfortunately, that seems impossible at times. So that's what we've got for today. Obviously, like we say, Cunha is pretty much done. Potential to go for someone like Gyokeres if we get Champions League. Could we end up with an even bigger striker, or do we get Delap and spend the money elsewhere on a player like Ederson or similar? Those seem to be the major priorities at the moment. But obviously, United are still keeping a keen eye on alternatives at striker by continuing to watch um, Gyokeres, and I think we should be on the lookout for alternative names to Ederson in the market as well. We should expect to see some youth getting their debuts on Sunday. Hopefully, we should expect to see something on Mentato as well in the next few days, if not today, as that's something that is supposed to happen. I don't like it is supposed to be, things are supposed to happen on that. So we'll see there. And then injuries, the hope is that Ahmad and Delict can make the squad for Thursday. Whether they play or not is another story, but then on Sunday, get some minutes and be ready fully for the second leg. Okay, that's what I have for today. Might go live later if there's anything fun to discuss, but otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next video.